Welcome to Understand All. I'm your host, Aslekeir Gairleif. Today, we're embarking on a thrilling journey back in time to explore one of the most remarkable transformations in human history, the Meiji Restoration in Japan. So buckle up, it's going to be an exhilarating ride. Imagine this, the year is 1868. Japan, a nation that had been largely isolated from the outside world for over 2 centuries under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate, suddenly finds itself at a crossroads. The arrival of Commodore Perry and his black ships from the United States in 1853 had forced Japan to confront a harsh reality. The world had moved on without them. Western powers, with their advanced technology and military might, were now knocking at Japan's door, demanding trade and diplomatic relations. The choice was clear: adapt or risk being colonized, like so many other nations in Asia. But change would not come easily to a society steeped in centuries of tradition and a rigid social hierarchy. The samurai, the warrior class that had long dominated Japanese society, found themselves facing an existential crisis. Their way of life, their very identity, was under threat. But amidst this turmoil, a group of forward-thinking leaders emerged, determined to steer Japan into the modern age. In a bold move, they rallied behind the young Emperor Meiji, who had been little more than a figurehead under the shogunate. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration began, and Japan embarked on a journey of transformation that would reverberate throughout the world. The speed and scale of change during the Meiji period was staggering. Let's put it into perspective. In just a few decades, Japan went from a feudal society to a modern, industrialized nation. According to historian Marius B. Jansen in his book The Making of Modern Japan, the country's railway network expanded from virtually nothing to over 7,000 kilometers by 1900. That's like going from horse-drawn carriages to bullet trains in the blink of an eye. But it wasn't just about infrastructure. The Meiji government was determined to overhaul every aspect of Japanese society. They abolished the feudal class system, where your status was determined by birth. They introduced universal education, ensuring that every child, regardless of background, had access to learning. In fact, by 1900, the literacy rate had soared to an impressive 90% for males and 60% for females, according to Janet Hunter's book, The Emergence of Modern Japan. But perhaps most remarkably, Japan began to build a modern military, one that could stand toe-to-toe with the Western powers. The once proud samurai traded their swords for guns and uniforms. Japan's leaders studied the best practices of European armies and navies, and soon, Japan had a fighting force to be reckoned with. In less than 50 years, Japan would shock the world by defeating the mighty Russian Empire in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905, the first time an Asian nation had triumphed over a European power in the modern era. But amidst all this change, Japan faced a delicate balancing act: how to embrace modernity while preserving its unique cultural identity. It was a challenge that would define the Meiji period and beyond. On the one hand, Japan eagerly absorbed Western knowledge and technology. By 1900, an astonishing 3,000 foreign experts had been hired by the Japanese government to aid in the modernization process, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. At the same time, Japan sent its best and brightest abroad to learn from the West. The famous Iwakura mission of 1871-1873 saw a delegation of Japanese leaders travel to the United States and Europe, observing everything from factories to schools to political systems. They returned with a wealth of knowledge and a determination to apply the best of what they had learned to Japan's unique circumstances. But even as Japan donned Western-style suits and built smokestacks, it fiercely guarded its cultural heritage. Traditional arts like kabuki theater and woodblock prints experienced a renaissance during the Meiji period, even as new forms of expression emerged. Writers like Natsume Soseki and Mori Ogai grappled with the complexities of modernization in their novels, while artists like Kobayashi Kiyochika captured the changing face of Japan in vivid, sometimes haunting detail. Of course, rapid change is never without its challenges and contradictions. The breakneck pace of industrialization came with a heavy price: long hours, dangerous working conditions, and environmental degradation. The Ashio copper mine, for example, became notorious for its pollution, poisoning nearby rivers and devastating agricultural land. And while the Meiji period is often celebrated as a time of progress and enlightenment, it also had its dark chapters. The same nationalist fervor that fueled Japan's modernization drive also led to the suppression of dissent and the persecution of minorities. The indigenous Ainu people of Hokkaido, for instance, faced forced assimilation policies that threatened to erase their language and culture. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Meiji Restoration is the way it challenged assumptions about the very nature of modernity. For centuries, the West had regarded itself as the sole arbiter of progress, the standard by which all other civilizations were judged. But Japan's meteoric rise shattered that illusion. Here was an Asian nation that had not only caught up to the West, but in some ways had surpassed it. The ripple effects of Japan's transformation would be felt far beyond its shores. Across Asia, colonized and semi-colonized peoples looked to Japan as a model and an inspiration. If Japan could stand up to the West, why couldn't they? The Meiji Restoration planted the seeds of anti-colonial nationalism that would blossom in the 20th century, from China to India to Vietnam. But Japan's story is also a cautionary tale about the perils of unchecked nationalism and militarism. The same drive that had propelled Japan to greatness would also lead it down a dark path of imperial expansion, and, ultimately, to the catastrophe of World War II. It's a sobering reminder that progress and enlightenment are not always linear or inevitable. So what can we learn from the Meiji Restoration today, more than 150 years later? In a world that is once again grappling with rapid change and upheaval, Japan's experience offers both inspiration and warning. It shows us that no society, no matter how entrenched in tradition, is immune to the forces of change. It demonstrates the incredible human capacity for adaptation and reinvention. But it also reminds us of the dangers of nationalism run amok, of the importance of balancing progress with social justice and environmental sustainability. As we navigate our own turbulent times, we might do well to look back on the Meiji period with both admiration and humility, to marvel at the audacity of a nation that dared to reimagine itself, but also to heed the lessons of history, lest we repeat its mistakes. The story of modern Japan is, in many ways, the story of the modern world, a tale of astonishing triumphs and sobering tragedies, of the eternal human struggle to shape our destiny in an ever-changing world. And that's our deep dive into the Meiji Restoration, a pivotal moment in history that continues to resonate to this day. I hope this journey has been as eye-opening for you as it has been for me. The next time you marvel at Japan's bullet trains or cutting-edge technology, remember the samurai who traded their swords for textbooks, the visionaries who dared to imagine a different future for their nation. This is Aslekeir Gairleif, your guide through the fascinating world of Understand All. Join me next time as we continue to explore the people, events, and ideas that have shaped our world. Until then, stay curious, my friends.